What's going on, guys? My name is Arrow, and in today's video I am bringing you the tankiest assassin that I've ever played. Let's go. So this build is partially a product of my chat. I did a subathon last week, and one of the sub goals was to allow chat to vote on the next build that I was going to play. The way it worked is chat would vote on a number of categories, starting with something like attack or spell, and then spell one. So then what kind of damage type? Lightning, fire, cold, chaos. Chaos won. And what the final product was, a hit-based, self-cast assassin with forbidden Rite. And then from there, the world was my oyster. So naturally I thought, okay, forbidden Rite is going to be a pretty serious problem on assassin, because assassin has effectively no recovery outside of the poison recovery and very, very little defenses. So naturally, I went and checked out the price of a stasis prison. It was 29 divines at the time of purchasing. I don't know what they are now. I don't know what they'll be after this video comes out, but be prepared for those to probably go up in price after people see this video. So if the intro footage interests you, I would go buy one now. So this build is going to break the concept of what EHP looks like in Path of Exile. PoB number that we have in PoB at the moment is 61,000 effective health. That number doesn't mean anything for this build. We have such an absurd amount of recovery that it effectively means we are immune to anything but one-shots. And one-shots come in a variety of forms. They come from lucky rolls on damage, they come from crits, they come from difficult map mods. I can assure you, if there was ever a time to ignore the defensive numbers in PoB, this is the time. You can take a look at my beard that I did. You can look at the bossing showcases of me face tanking things. There's a variety of reasons why this build is tankier than it looks on paper, and we'll get into those throughout the video. So how do we scale damage? Let's start there. Power charge stacking is pretty much the only way to scale damage as an assassin. So as a hit-based assassin, we are going to be doing chaos damage and using critical strikes. We get over 90% crit chance pretty easily due to how effective power charge stacking is. The build uses 11 total power charges and gets there quite easily. And because we use Badge of the Brotherhood, 11 frenzy charges as well. Frenzy charges are great because they give more damage, but they also give cast speed. Cast speed allows us to hit faster, but also ramp up our self-damage faster so that we recoup faster. So let's talk about that a little bit. The stasis prison gives us up to 100% of damage taken recouped as life. If we take a 1000 damage hit, we will then recoup 1000 health over the next 4 seconds. We actually end up with a good bit more than 100% recoup. And the idea is, with the self-damage of Forbidden Rite, when you start to cast it, you start to ramp up your recoup. So you are going into battle, recouping damage already. So right before we start a boss fight, we attack for 2 or 3 seconds, ramp up our recoup, and then dive in, and we are regenerating thousands and thousands of life per second. I don't know what the actual numbers are because that calculation is a little bit over my head, but it's enough to pretty much prevent us from getting bursted down by any mechanic in the game. What I love about a build like this is it doesn't utilize the standard defensive mechanisms like armor and max res, but instead our defenses are focused around the Divine Flesh Keystone. We'll talk more about this later, but effectively what it does is it gives us max chaos res, which helps us defend against our own self damage, and then 50% of elemental damage is taken as chaos. So if you get 90 chaos res, half of your damage goes up against that 90 res, effectively splitting the difference between the 75 normal res we have and 90 max res. The build as is has 89 max chaos res, simply because I moved some things around and couldn't get that one last res in, but I'm sure there are ways to min-max it if you really wanted to. We have lucky spell suppress that gets us to 95%, a little bit of block, and a healthy chunk of evasion. On top of that, the build has life regen, crazy amount of life gain on hit, as well as all the recoup. The build is also fully ailment immune thanks to the Storm Shroud jewel alongside of shock immune boots. I honestly loved this build. I did not expect it to go as well as it did, because I did get sort of pigeonholed into this very specific archetype, but it ended up being something that I was really excited to share, and I hope people try this build out. So let's get into the gear, the gems, etc. Talk about how everything works and get you playing if you want. Let's go. Okay, so here we have level 97. Chat made me do it as the character because I was forced to play this, but it ended up being more than worth it. Played it to 97, which is way longer than I usually play a build. I usually not necessarily get bored of builds, but I get excited about this idea and I move on. But this one really hooked me, and I played it all the way to level 97. Get it to 97 so easily is because it just didn't really die that much. I was putting it up against pretty difficult content. Really the only thing that ever killed me is when I take minus chaos res altar and then one shot myself. If you take minus chaos res and you take the one that's doubled, it basically takes you from 90 max chaos res to negative 10 or negative 20, and one cast of Forbidden Rite would just kill me. So that was the usual reason I died. I died a couple times to some really Giga Chad morphs that I was running. So let's talk about some of the gear that allows us to do all this damage and still be really tanky. So Void Batteries. Void Battery, +1 power charge, spell damage per power charge, cast speed, crit chance. This is the go-to power charge stacking weapon. And then combine that with a power charge shield. I then crafted this myself. The goal here is to get +3 maximum chaos as a suffix. You can use Reforged Chaos, you can use fossils. There's no one way to get this. You can also spam essences, but getting +3 maximum chaos on your build is important. So then I got tier 5 cold, and I actually slammed the chaos res on. I got very lucky to make that. This only took me a couple of divines worth, but I just tried a few different methods. You got to get the max chaos res, then a life and some energy. Some interesting tech on the Void Battery brought to you by one of my viewers, Bardley Beck. Shout out Bardley. You buy a prophecy wand that has 40% reduced attribute requirements on it from Heist. You then take an Omen of Fortune, which you can get for, I think it was around 2.4 divines when I did this, and apply it to that wand, giving yourself a 40% reduced attribute requirements battery. Now, why is this so exciting? Void Battery has incredibly high int requirement. So this lowered it by, I think, about 98. So we're at 147 now instead of, I believe, 245. That allows us to get 9 more tattoos in the tree. Now, there are definitely few more tattoos that I could use to min-max, but that tech is really cool, and you can apply that to other things. Okay, so that's the cool tech with the Void Battery. One thing you can't do though is then apply an enchantment to it with Harvest, because there already is one on there. So don't roll over it by accident. For the helmet, this was fairly easy to craft. Elevated minus chaos res, as well as +1 power charge. You awaken those together on a helmet projectile. Got your helmet. I got pretty unlucky with a couple of these rolls, but I also had a space for life and 1 res. Void Battery, absolute staple of any power charge or frenzy charge build. You guys know this is one of my favorite items. Elusive effect. We already scale a huge amount of elusive from Mistwalker, so 50% increase there, and then another 110% increased effect here. So our base elusive is a ton of move speed and a ton of chance to avoid it. Combining that with a little block, a bunch of evasion, we pretty much don't get hit that often. The star of the show is the Stasis Prison, and this was 29 divines when I bought it. Can't promise you what it'll be now. Oh, actually a little cheaper. It's 20 divines. If you want to play this build, go buy one right now. So what this does is it gives you damage taken and recouped as life, which is a ton. It gives you a little bit of life and then a bunch of evasion. Debuffs expire faster is a nice quality of life. Our rings are really cool. I did a lot of Reforged Caster to get these. There's a lot of ways to do this. There's a lot of different mods that you want to get on these. But basically what I was trying to do was get cast speed, reduced effective curses on you, life for enemy hit spells. The idea here is getting a bunch of life on hit, hitting a bunch of times per second, helps us recover life that we're doing to ourselves. So between these two rings, we have 33 life gained per enemy hit, 86 reduced effect of curses on us, and 34 cast speed. Of course, I have some life, both of these, some chaos res. For the boots, you want to get onslaught on these, but it's basically just solving some strength, getting shock immunity for Storm Shroud, and move speed. The belt, this is a very nice Stygian that I crafted myself. The best way to get something like this is to get life, maybe 2 res, open prefix that you can hunter slam. You can either get life, chaos damage, or flash charge when you deal a crit. All 3 are good, but actually best in slot for us is flash charge on crit. Because we crit so much, we're hitting, I think, 7 casts per second times 5 projectiles on a single target, 35 hits per second, and that's generating flash charges on a 0.1 second cooldown. So pretty much 10 charges per second are coming back to us on single targets. Realistically going to be a little bit less than that, but That's a lot of flash charges. It really helps us keep up this dying sun, which is giving us 2 of our 5 projectiles, but has really, really bad uptime otherwise. So I really, really recommend something like this. It doesn't have to be quite this good with the high res life and ES, but definitely get the flash charger. For the gloves, we're just grabbing some spell suppress, some dex, and some fire res. We get our chaos leech here, and frenzy. We obviously have 11 of those, so percent per is really. For our flasks, we talked about the dying sun, 2 additional proj. Forbidden Rite can hit up to 5 times on a single target, so basically you get 1 projectile from Forbidden Rite which targets. You then get a secondary projectile of all of the other ones that it sends out at random enemies. 1 of those will also hit your main target. That's 2 projectiles. Now your helm enchant has Forbidden Rite fires an additional projectile. That's 3. With Dying Sun, you get to 5. Getting over that is, I'm not entirely sure if it's either impossible or just really difficult, but 5 seems to be the sweet spot, so don't try to get more than that. See GMP in a Forbidden Rite build, it's probably a waste, or they're just using it for clear. Now you could go for additional projectiles with like a warrior's tail on the tree, but I figured just a Dying Sun with flash charge on crit and some decent uptime. You can get some flash duration tattoos on your decks. I just grabbed life. I probably should have gotten flash duration, to be completely honest. The next flask that we're using, a sapphire flask. I threw this on just to take less cold damage from Shaper. I wanted to reduce mana cost. It's got pretty good uptime for reduced mana cost, is another reason I used it, but it's a whatever flask. It's not super important. We do have reduced damage taken of fire and cold, which is pretty nice. I actually had a life flask here for a while that I never used, so I just took it off. If you have an opportunity to use your life flask in this build, you're not playing correctly. We have a quartz flask, which has some movement speed, some phasing. This is also not ideal. The flasks are just kind of okay on this build. Movement speed and evasion, and then cast speed. You definitely can mess around with these. You could use something like a bottled faith, drop some crit on the tree somewhere. So this Searching Eye Jewel, I actually got a really good deal on this. It was corrupted blood and reservation efficiency. You need a tiny bit. You might have to mess around with this in your build depending on your exact numbers, but I needed a little bit to get my last aura in, so I just got a jewel that had 2%. Go over the gems. We have Assassin's Mark on cast when damage taken, because we are constantly damaging ourselves. Our cast when damage takens go off really often. I have a self-cast Despair here because I have Wither on hit from a Balance of Terror. We hit approximately 35 times per second, which means full uptime on our Wither stacks. Casting Despair is really, really fast. When you have all your frenzy charges up and all your buffs up, you can cast Despair almost instantly. In the helmet, we have a Divine Blessing set up for haste. Haste and Vol Haste have pretty similar uptime. So basically every 15 seconds or so, I just press both of these buttons at the same time, give myself a ton of move speed and cast speed. It also gives attack speed for our shield charge, and this build is quite zoomy. Speaking of shield charge, we have that here in the helmet as well. Arrogance setup in the shield is Vitality for Leech, also to enable the Watcher's Eye, and then Divergent Arctic Armor. We take less fizz and fire damage while stationary. We are fighting, we are stationary. Basically play this build like a channeling skill, and you just stand there, hold down right click, and you just fight the boss. Sometimes we move, there's a big slam incoming or something, but for the most part we just face tank. In the boots we have an Enlightened 3 aura setup, Zealotry, Petrified Blood, and Grace. In our gloves we have a fun little cast when damage taken setup. This goes off all the time. We generate endurance charges here with Enduring Composure. If you've been hit recently, you gain an endurance charge every second. So we've always been hit recently because we hit ourselves. So a Mortal Call will go off. It'll give us less elemental and physical damage taken, and then more physical damage reduction per endurance charge removed. So 3 of those is another 45. So that is 71% less physical damage taken. When combined with the Divergent Arctic Armor, while we are stationary, we are taking 90% less physical damage. When that Mortal Call goes down, we have endurance charges to combine with our Divergent Arctic Armor, which is not going to be quite as good, but you see our uptime is really, really good on Mortal Call. And the second Mortal Call is down, we're just about back up to 3 endurance charges. And when we stand and fight bosses, this is what it looks like. It jumps back up to 3 charges, then our Mortal Call will go off again, a couple of seconds of that, and then we get our endurance charges back. This feels amazing against bosses. I could not believe how tanky this actually felt, which is why the POB doesn't really show you the amount of damage that you're taking. Your actual effective HP is way, way higher than what it says. So also in here, we have a cold snap. This is actually how I generate frenzy charges. I could not believe how good this tech is. This is going off all the time. As you can see, it'll cast the cold area. So as we go around in map, it casts. When we damage ourselves, it instantly casts the cold snap on the ground. Our projectiles hit the enemies there and generates frenzy charges. That's up pretty much all the time. On bosses, we have the mark mastery, which gives us charges when you hit your marked enemy. That unfortunately requires a little bit of ramp, but it doesn't take too long to get it up. That's what she said. Lastly, we have a level 3 Forbidden Rite in here. This is basically just to help the self-damage recoup ramping, because we damage ourselves, causes us to cast another Forbidden Rite while we're casting, and that just does more damage to us, which makes recoup more damage. Lastly, we'll talk about the 6 link chest. We have 21 Anomalous Forbidden Rite. Fires extra projectiles at up to 2 surrounding enemies. This is just nice for clear. Use Awakened Void Manip for +1 damage. Intensify. This is super, super nice. The area of effect isn't that powerful with this, but what it does have is stand still and cast, which is every time we're fighting something tanky, it gives us a more damage. We get 4 total intensity, which is 60% more area damage. These projectiles, when they hit the ground, cause area damage. Use Anomalous Spell Echo. Now, ideally, you'd want an Awakened Spell Echo here. I just didn't want to pay for it. It's another maybe 15% more damage, which is probably going to help on Ubers. You'll be able to take them down a little bit quicker. We have an increased critical damage support and power charge on critical. 11 power charges. That's 44% more damage. Okay, let's talk about the tree. First, let's go through each of the jewels, talk about their value. So, this one right here, the Glorious Vanity. There's a ton of options here. That's what makes this really, really fun. Cult of Chaos node is what you really want to focus on. You want to get 2 of these. Now, if you could get 1 more for, 3 points, that might be worth taking. I'm not entirely sure. But 2 of these gets us to 89%. It also gives us Chaos Res. And then basically what I looked for on the way were things that were kind of useful. Got a little Chaos damage, a little area damage, a little move speed. And you can use the Timeless Jewel calculator in PoB to look for all of these things. Next, we have the Balance of Terror. This gives us Wither on hit if we've cast Despair in the past 10 seconds. Like I said, just once every 10 seconds, tap that button. It casts super quick. You keep going. The Unnatural Instinct. This is the tech that I use on every single Badge of the Brotherhood build. Basically, what this gives you is everything in this radius, which for a Frenzy and Power Charge stacking build is massive. So you get the crit here. You get increased evasion per Frenzy Charge. You get 2 life nodes. You get 2 res and evasion nodes. Blind duration isn't super useful. You get a little bit of attack speed, and then you get these 4 nodes, which you can allocate, tattoo, and then unallocate. So in total, we get 24% evasion, we get 44% evasion, 20% increased life, 8 all res, and 50 critical strike chance from these 3. It's the best 3 points you can spend on this entire build, and if you're going to play this, I know these can be a little bit pricey, but for 4 divines, they're actually much cheaper than they were before. This build's way cheaper than it was when I put it. Oh, mandatory, gotta have it. On the clusters, we have Touch of Cruelty, hinders enemies, they take more damage, and then we have cast speed and cast damage. Born of Chaos is what we're going for here. I originally had 2 of these, but I wanted endurance charges, so I had to drop one. This gives you 3 max chaos res, and then you can get some really, really nice stuff on the way. So these give us 17 chaos res, some strength, and a little bit of life. This could be a much better jewel. And if you're going to play this build, I recommend that you min-max this jewel a little bit more. And then we talked about the other small cluster already. It gives Enduring Composure. This gives me a bunch of stats on this first node, and then endurance charges. We get this tattoo here for an additional power charge that gets us to 11. Here we have the Storm Shroud, which when combined with these boots, give us full ailment immunity, adding to our very, 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 very tanky feel of the build. We use Eldritch Battery because this costs a lot of mana. Now, when we're leeching, we get a little bit more back. What I would actually recommend that I thought about after I finish this build is using some of our int tattoos to get recharge rate or RES. 10%, if you use a couple of those, that's really going to give you a nice boost. There's a lot of tattoos available on this build. We'll go through the tattoos at the end. We take an additional curse. and then this blinds enemies that we curse. This jewel is just good damage. Got some cast speed, some multi, life, and recoup. Those are the best ways to scale this build. So this has all 4 of them. Up here we have a Watcher's Eye, which should probably be divined. What's mandatory, I think, is evade hits while affected by grace, and then vitality. You can either get life recovery rate or life gain on hit. Life recovery rate is actually better than life gain on hit because it scales your recoup. We have absurd recoup, so it gives you even more of that. Effects of Consecrated Groundlinger. This is just a nice to have. When I saw that this was on there, I was like, I'll spend an extra divine for that. I really didn't pay that much for one. But if you were to try to find this exact jewel, it would be very expensive. So as far as things on the tree, this tree is very stretched out, unfortunately, and it causes me to have, basically, I'm really close to a lot of things that I take. I want to take Corruption, but it's just not worth dropping anything else for it at the moment. I'd love to get the instant leech from this mastery here. That would make our ES never a problem at all. It'd also give us a ton more life recovery. But again, not worth it. Of course, we take the power charges and we anoint the 3rd. And then it's basically just scaling life and crit. So tattoos, I grabbed 2 of these. I think this gets us to like 98% reduced effective curses because of our rings. Over here we have, I needed a lightning res roll, grab some life. We have a bunch more life nodes here. Just, I wanted to get more and more life, because the more life you have, the more things that you can tank. If you can tank the hit, you can survive. But we'll also talk about the Assassin Ascendancy. So Mistwalker, we cannot be crit, which is a huge way to smooth out damage. Increased elusive effect, and it gives us elusive full uptime. Obviously, taking power charges here and here for crit chance, crit multi. And then lastly, opportunistic. This is a super underrated defensive node. When you are fighting one enemy, you get 25% more damage. And then when there are 2 rare or unique enemies nearby, so Simulacrum, super juiced maps, boss invitations, you take 20% reduced damage. Includes dots, everything. With all the damage reduction that we have in this build already, things like Arctic Armor, endurance charges, etc., this is a huge boost. This build is actually really tanky. And that is pretty much it. This is an awesome build. I'm super happy with it. It started as what was about to be a little bit of a meme because chat was forcing me to play something that I wasn't sure how good it was going to be. But this build is phenomenal. When you put everything together, all of the defensive layers, this build feels almost immortal, and it's an assassin. So if you play this build, please stop by the stream and let me know, or let me know down in the comments below. If you have any questions on it, you can stop by my Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0__. I'm live almost every single day. I just launched a merch store, so check out the link in the description below. I also have my Patreon, Discord, etc. It's all down there in the description, so check all that out. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care.